like once you achieve something, you think that's it, but the reality is that it's not. Like you need to have your own reason to keep doing these things. Like the goal isn't ever like the result that you think it's going to be. You need to have the drive in there for your own.
Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of How Do You End Up Doing That with me, Alex Jeffers. This podcast is all about speaking to people about jobs they've ended up doing and what got them into doing it, because usually people have got a bit of a story to tell about how they ended up doing what they're currently doing if it's slightly out of the ordinary. This week's episode is with Joe Latham, who has gone on a journey from studying design at university through being in a band and making a living kind of customising MySpace pages for people, and now works as a graphic novelist, with a few stops in between. We also talk on his feelings of imposter syndrome, how a lack of confidence potentially put his career on the back foot, and how he ended up designing golf balls for Vernon Kay. Joe has had a really interesting journey, and this was such a heartwarming story to listen to originally, and then again when I had the pleasure of editing it down. Just like the recording of episode 2, I couldn't really edit it down to any less than just over an hour without ruining the flow of things and the wonderful stories Joe had to tell. If you listen to this and you've got any comments or feedback, anything you'd like to say to me really, feel free to drop me an email to alex@howdoyou.com. That's HOWDYOU.com. And I'll take a look at any emails that come across, and hopefully I can get back to you with some answers. So let's get stuck into our conversation with Joe. Cheers! Hello, Joe!
Hello!
Hello, thank you for coming on the podcast today to have a chat about your life in the creative industries. How's everything going at the moment?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's going well. Busy time of life, I think. It's hard to sum up everything that happens all at once when you become old, isn't it? So just
when you become old, you've got kids, Christmas has just
yeah,
happened, you're in the new
it's
year.
like having 1,000
it's
buses turning up at once, and you don't know which one to get on.
Yeah. You didn't really order any of them. You're not entirely sure where most of them are going, but you feel like you should probably have one foot on each of those buses as it pulls you in different
That's
directions.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you for coming on today. I guess first things first, if you could introduce us to who you are and what it is you currently do.
Okay, so my name is Joe Latham, and I am a graphic novelist. I'm never quite sure exactly what title to use for that because I write and draw everything myself from scratch. So I am working with a publisher and an editor, so that's the kind of current sort of back and forth with regards to my career. And yeah, that's what I consider myself now. So a cartoonist, I guess, if you wanted to distill it down, but because there's a lot of writing involved, it's kind of more than that. But I don't want to call myself a writer because that feels grandiose. So
I feel like writers deserved. You can definitely say writer as well as illustrator. I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one because when I was saying about doing this call, and I said to a couple of people, "Oh, I'm interviewing a guy called Joe. He's a comic book artist." They were like, "Oh, let's have a look." And then I showed them some of the stuff that you've done, and they went, "Oh, so that's not comic though, is it? That's more graphic novel kind of stuff."
I see that.
And I think in people's minds, they think of comic as being, Marvel, DC, that kind of like flash panels.
That's it. I mean, there's a stigma to it with that regard, isn't there? Because it's kind of, it gets pigeonholed quite easily. But there's also like it's such a broad thing, and with publications like the Phoenix for younger readers, there's a lot to it now. Like I didn't really discover the breadth of graphic novels as I currently know them, and as the kind that I currently make as a way to sort of explore more complex and intricate stories for a wider range of audiences. I didn't really discover that until very late, honestly. Yeah, like I must have been mid-20s. Like I didn't know that stuff really existed. Like I think I'd read a bit of the Sandman comics when I was a young teen. I was probably about 11 or 12 when I read some of the Sandman comics, but beyond that, I thought it was 2000 AD, Marvel and DC, and like that stuff's great as well. But it's a big world.
It is, and I remember because you're a few years older than me, so you're 6 years older than me.
Yeah.
But when you were, I guess you were in your mid-20s, I would have been late teens, and that would have been around about the time that Watchmen came
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
the film, and that was the time that I think there was a big sort of surge in interest in graphic
Mm.
novels around about that time when Watchmen came out, and there was suddenly you could get them in WH Smiths, and you could get them all over the place. And maybe that was like a bit of a timing sort of thing with the more prevalence of graphic novels and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I
But
mean that film is interesting in particular because it looks like a superhero thing, but it's kind of it's more than that, isn't it? Like it treads a lot of social and political ground as well. So I think that's something that I
yes,
think maybe tripped audiences in a good way, and I don't know if it really gets the credit for that.
I feel like it's a very undervalued, or not under, maybe underappreciated film. I love it. I think it's great. I really love
Yeah,
Watchmen. Very dark, very moody, very strong
yeah,
strong
yeah,
commentary in there, and it's not just all about the kicking ass. There's some pretty heavy themes in
yeah,
there.
absolutely.
So yeah, there's that. I think about around about the same time was it Sin City came
Yeah,
out, which
yeah,
another sort
yeah,
of comic book esque, the way that the cinematography was laid out in that black and
yeah.
white comic book panels, lots of stuff like that. That
Yeah, I
was
mean, comics
I
get
thought that
mined
was
for for ideas for films and
yeah
TV, especially like even now, like it's still happening because I guess all of the research and design work is pretty much done ahead of any production.
yeah. It's a lot of the storyboarding, I guess, has already been done
Yeah.
for, for them. Yeah, let's kind of I guess dial it right the way back to school.
Mhm.
Look at kind of your journey your journey through school. When you went through go through high school, did you sort of think I want to be in the creative industries, or was it something that came to you as a career choice later? Yeah, what was your sort of thinking as you were going through school?
Yeah. So I always loved drawing, right? And I loved writing. Um, the recent convergence of those two disciplines for me is kind of breaking new ground for me mentally. Like for years, I didn't think I deserved to be doing these two things as a job. So when I was in school, I remember even in primary school, I remember writing short stories. And if we were doing like a short story session in, when I'm like seven or eight, I remember I'd be the last one to finish writing because I'd just keep going and my story would get longer and longer. So then when the teacher was reading out all the other kids' stories, I'd still be writing and then I'd hand mine in like right at the end when they finished reading everyone else's and then they'd read mine out and it gave me that overwhelming sense of pride because I was the last one to like it was probably terrible. That's the thing. It was probably a really awful story, but I was so proud of it. The ideas were flowing, and similarly with
Mm.
drawing, I used to just love sitting and drawing, even as a little kid. That was just the thing that gave me peace. And then in high school, I studied. I wanted to give like I'm not an idiot. I mean, I'm not a total idiot. So I wanted to study a broad array of subjects. So I studied economics and maths, as well as art. I wanted to set myself up to have a career, but I didn't think that art would ever be considered a career, even though that was the thing I only wanted to do. Like I just wanted to draw and paint. I just wanted to, use my mind in that way to think of new ideas and to keep painting and keep exploring feelings and emotions and stories and things like that. So that was absolutely what I wanted to do in school. But there was the other part of my brain, I think probably from my dad's influence largely, because my mum was a piano teacher when I was around this age. So, like, she loved playing the piano and she had so many friendly people that would come to our house and they just adored my mum. And my dad was away a lot with work and his work I never really understood. He did business. I'm doing air quotes, but that was how I understood it. It's like
Okay,
he was doing business. He was doing management consultant, financial directing, money-based business stuff.
stuff that a child will never understand those
Absolutely. Yeah.
words on their own or
Yeah,
together.
absolutely. And even when I got older, I was like, so do you fire people? Is that like, what? I don't understand what you
Yeah.
do. Do you look at like graphs and tell people that they're fired? And he was like, well, I have had to fire some people in the past. I'm like, I still don't understand how it works. And like, there's more to my dad than that. He was also trained as an accountant prior to that, so his journey into business is a slightly sort of zigzaggy one. But there was always that influence to try and make sure I had a sensible trajectory for my potential career, and like how to look after myself and earn. And I understand that as a parent, I understand, like, you want to know that your kids are safe, but also uh, I think for me there's that greater sense of wanting to know that the world isn't like a closed box. Like, there's options, there's avenues, and especially now, like the way that the internet has changed things over the last 30 years. Because I remember my dad coming home with a laptop and us connecting to dial-up and joining those first chat rooms. And
Yeah.
like, I was on fan forums for Elliott Smith and yeah, just bands from the, well, when was that? In the late 90s. Yeah, bands from the late 90s. I was on these different forums and things, and yeah, if you could have seen how big of an influence that would have in opening doors, then I don't think I would have had any issue with considering pursuing art in a stronger sense.
When you were at school, was the careers advice, and you have the sort of the careers sessions that can sort of tell you? Did you kind of go to your careers advisor and say, I want to be an artist, and did they kind of guide you down the route of, well, there's graphic design, there's graphic communication, there's illustration, there's pure art? Did they kind of give you any advice in that regard, or were they more, that's not a real career?
Yeah, that second one. Yeah, they were.
Okay.
Yeah, they were quite. In terms of the direct advice they give you, they're very hands off, and I don't think any of them really understood that you could be an artist to make a living. So they would suggest I look into doing architect work, like maybe consider being an architect. And I did actually. Yeah, I
Okay.
applied for an architecture course when I was applying for university. So that was all part of, it goes into your brain. You take growing up seriously when you're um yeah, like 14, 15, trying to figure out what your next steps are.
I did not. I unfortunately, well, no, I sort of did. Yeah, kind of at that time, 14, 15. I think there was a lot of pressure to kind of pick sensible career
Yeah,
choices. You've got to pick what you want to do with the rest of your life at GCSE
yeah,
age, and
yeah,
then all of a sudden you do your GCSEs, and you're like, actually, you know what? I didn't want to do any of that. I wasn't really that keen on science, and
yeah,
I think that's sort of similar sort of feeling with a lot of people, that they kind of got, got quite bad careers advice at school,
yeah,
to do something that was only really quite tenuously linked to what they wanted to do from a tick list of options on a
yeah,
box,
yeah.
really.
And I think honestly, I think artist wasn't actually an option on there. Like, when they're going through their possible suggestions for what kids could grow up to do as careers, I don't think artist was ever on the form. Like, I think it was just not an option for them to even put forward to us, because they didn't know how it would pan out. And ironically, I do think that now picking a more niche specialty is going to be the way to go, because there's so many people out there that have a lot of skills. So if you're able to really make yourself stand out in a specific field, then surely that's much more powerful than just following bad advice from a counselor at 15.
Being much more specialist, I think, is definitely the way to go.
Yeah,
But I guess on the flip side of that, when you're kind of looking at that sort of age, you don't want to specialize too soon. You want to leave your options open, but kind of,
yeah,
I guess, you want to take it in more of like a pyramid. Well, I'm entering into this field and then specialize within the field, but never leaving it to giving yourself the opportunity to jump back outwards and then go in a slightly different direction if you feel that it's not right for you.
yeah, that's true.
Definitely kind of having that focus, something to aim towards, and a target to aim for
Yeah, I mean, I
is
think
definitely.
for me, maybe it's more the impact that it has on your mental health, and like, because I know the language around mental health has changed a lot since I was that age, but um, just feeling like you don't have any choices is such it's a crushing feeling, when like the world should be opening up to you, not closing, as you're reaching that
Yeah.
age. So, because I guess more skills is better than less skills, right? But just knowing that those could go in so many different paths is what you want to feel, rather than, because I remember basically crying to my brother down the phone when I was graduating uni, because I was like, what the flip am I going to do now? Like, I'm going to have to get a job I hate because there's no design jobs for graduates. Because sorry, I'm sort of jumping a bit, but um, I was just devastated because I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm not going to be able to get a job in design, so I have to get a job that I hate, which won't pay me enough to live either with friends. My friends are all moving to different cities because they're either going home because they've graduated too, or they graduated a year earlier because of my my foundation course. Yeah, and I was just absolutely devastated at the prospect of um, getting trapped in a totally different discipline yet again, having to deal with, I don't know, I'm running out of words to describe it, but I just remember that feeling being so overwhelming and feeling unbelievably sad at the prospect of doing something that I just did not want to do at that point.
That must be something that catches up with a lot of people when they get to the end of university, because the education system is very much structured with, you go to school, you do GCSEs, great, you've done those, now you do your A levels, great, now you've done those, you go to university, great, now you've done that.
Bye,
Ta-ra!
yeah.
Have fun. Yeah. Okay, go on. Sort yourself out now. You're 21,
Yeah.
21, 22, so you must be old enough to sort yourself out. But as
You're
people,
still a kid then, aren't you, really? And
you are so lost in this world of, suddenly you're dealing with the people who've got more experience and the people who've done other
yeah,
things, and
yeah,
your academic career has suddenly come to an end. And what do you do then?
yeah.
Why, you could get a master's?
Yeah. We had one tutor who passively mentioned that if you're getting a 2-1 or a first, you should be considering doing a master's because it will help you like jump a step in your career. But he said it in front
Yeah.
of a room of maybe 100 people. There was like a shared lecture across the different artistic courses, and it was just one statement. Like that was it. He didn't like. No one actually suggested it and said like this is a good idea. It was like one 10-second statement that this man said once, and that's it. And like what I don't think anyone did. Honestly, I think there might have been one or two people that stayed on, but it wasn't a particularly good university. Very little in the way of incentive to stay on longer than you have to there.
Yeah, I guess if there's no, you need that incentive, especially as someone who is in their early 20s. You're kind of figuring out what to do with your life, and
Yeah.
you really need that hook to keep you there. So if we go kind of back a bit from the end of university and look at going into university, you did a graphic design course where you said
Yeah.
you wanted to do animation.
Yeah, that's right. So I mentioned already that I had applied to an architecture course as well. So that was in Bath. And then the animation and the graphic design course were both in Newport, so UWCN. So I did Art Foundation in Cardiff. Is it called Cardiff Met now? Uh,
Yeah, there
yeah,
is. Yeah,
used to
Cardiff Met.
be UWIC. So they were,
Yeah.
I think they were twinned with Newport Uni at one point. But Newport Uni had a very bad reputation with the grades that kids were getting. So Cardiff kind of cut ties with them, understandably so, because Cardiff was a much better funded and a nicer university. Yeah, so I did Art Foundation in Cardiff, and that was a wonderful year, making lots of new friends, drawing and painting. Um, very little in the way of pressure, apart from towards the end, the final project. I remember there was a graphic design module, and you had to pick which sort of focus you wanted to concentrate on. And I picked graphic design because I was like, right, my brother's done this. He's gone through graphic design at uni. I want to, that's sensible because he gets to be creative, he gets to be artistic, and it's a job and it's a career, and because no one's going to pay me to draw and paint, so this is what I should do. So I focused on the graphic design module, and I think for my final piece, I did something with a newspaper and a painting. Like I think I did it was meant to be a juxtaposition of a headline with a painting, and to try and see what different feeling a contrasting headline to an image could make. It was a terrible idea, and it didn't really work.
Okay, that seems like an interesting idea.
Yeah, it just it didn't. I mean, I must have been, I would have been 19, and I just didn't know what I was doing, really. I think I was clutching at straws. So the animation and the graphic design course. So animation, if you are unaware, the course is going to be a lot of hand-drawn 2D animation, a lot of CG. The way that it was sold was a lot of 2D animation. One of the ladies that was running the course was well known for making those old charming animated bear adverts. I can't remember her name, but she was like, I did meet her on the interview and the application. She was lovely, and the work that she does is amazing and really sensitively drawn. So that was a big pulling point for that course. Um, and I would imagine now that they're doing more CG and using things like Toon Boom and things like that. It's a different software to either do 2D or 3D or even faux 3D animation stuff. But I love drawing, so that was the big pull for me. It was like I didn't really know that animation was even a career, really. I mean, obviously it is because everything's a career, but I just like to draw, and so I applied for that. I got accepted, but I got accepted to the graphic design course as well. In hindsight, I think I got worse vibes from the lecturers that interviewed me on the graphic design course, because I remember feeling kind of put aback at some of the questions that they were asking us, and I can't really put my finger on what they said, but I just remember coming away feeling a little bit less wanted, a little bit less warm about it. Um, which kind of it came out in a story uh, in the first year of uni when we went on a trip to I think it was Paris. So we were drinking with the lecturers in Paris,
Mm-hmm.
hotel lobby, and this one lecturer was trying to act cool because he was the young teacher. But he was just saying, "Oh, we were told we could let anyone on, so we just tick the list, tick, 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 and we don't care about whether you got skills." Not a good feeling when you're 19 and you're not even sure about what you're doing with your choices anyway.
No, to get that off your tutor.
Yeah, yeah. There were
Wow,
other
that's
tutors that were better though, and that's the thing. I think that's part of the big sort of life lesson is when you're studying, you don't need every teacher to be amazing. You just need one. Like you need one person that you either can absorb their passion or like you connect with in a slightly different way, because that's the thing that will pull you through. Um, and for me, there was a guy that was really into typography. Um, he was the one that I didn't get on with at first, but by the end of the course, he was the best one because he was the most consistent with his passion, and his lessons were always um, there was always a point. They were always grounded. I remember having a really traumatic Christmas at the middle of the first year. So we had like basically my mum and dad separated, or my dad left on Christmas Day when I just started uni. I remember going into uni, having had a terrible Christmas, and I went to the tutor. I was like, "Look, can I have a chat with you? I haven't done the homework over Christmas because this stuff happened, like, and I've been really struggling to deal with it." And he was really stern with me about it. And he was like, "Well, look, this is really important now. You need to have a real good think about what you're doing with your time. And this isn't the time to slack off. You need to pull your socks up and get on with this." And I don't know if it was like tough love to be like, "Look, I understand everyone's got going on, get on with it." But it did kind of help. Like it hurt at the time. I was kind of shocked because I was like, surely you should give sympathy in these
yeah,
circumstances.
yeah.
But it did actually kind of help because it meant that I was like, oh, all right, I guess I'll get on with it then, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely both sides of the argument there. You want that sympathy, and you kind of need that sympathy. And as a 19-year-old, you are still I guess, a vulnerable young person, and the teacher or tutor is a person who is responsible for your well-being and looking after your emotions. So they should really give some element of support
Yeah.
to you in that case. But on the flip side, it is their job as a tutor to get the best out of you as a
I mean,
student.
he
So
did give me support in a practical sense because I think he gave me an extra week to do the work, and it wasn't like the coursework at that point was a joke. It's like such a minuscule project that once you're earning money for doing creative projects, you realize that the actual turnaround time of like idea to sharing something is so different to um, what it is in uni. Like when you've got like months to work on an idea and research something, like it's just completely different.
I guess there's in university they kind of allow you that space and room to breathe, and then there's the difference between academia and commercial side of things where I've quite often found if I've been working with a designer from who's fresh out of uni, they're so reluctant to show you anything. until it's absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
But then you speak to someone who's been doing it for 10 years and they're like, here's my idea, here's a rough draft, take a look, what do you think?
Yeah.
And they're very like 1 day turnaround of like, here's the thing, tell me what you think, see if you're happy with this, and then we can work from there. But yeah, the sort of the fresh out of uni mindset is more, it must be absolutely perfect. And when it's absolutely perfect,
Yeah.
then I will present it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So much more pressure to try and do it that way though, because nothing's perfect, and we're so flawed as humans that you just hope that every time you create something, you're learning from either past projects, past successes, and past failures. Like that's the thing you want to be able to grow on, rather than get something perfect. Like done is much more valuable than perfect.
Yeah, what is it? Perfection is the enemy of good.
Yeah, yeah,
That extra sort of 5% that'll make something perfect could take you 3 times the amount of time it took you to get it to 95% of the way.
yeah. And if you're talking about artwork as well, that extra 5% might make it worse. Like when do you draw the line? And
Of course, you need to have that knowledge, self-awareness of when do I stop?
yeah,
When is it done? Not when is it perfect, but when is it finished
yeah,
and when is it done?
that's it.
Yeah, it's interesting kind of thought process there between university thinking and like going into the real world, I guess you could call it. Sorry, air
Yeah,
quotes then again.
yeah.
So if we kind of look at then you've gone through university, you've graduated. Obviously, we touched on a little bit earlier. You weren't happy about leaving. You were quite upset about leaving. Then what was next? What did you do straight out of university?
I played drums. So
Okay.
the yeah. So I was in a band with my brother from the age of I guess 15 or 16. Whenever I started learning the drums, I was instantly in a band with my brother and a couple of other school friends as well. So we did that through uni, and then when I graduated, only real plan was to make more music. So uh,
Okay.
figure out how to do that in any way possible. Me and my brother wrote lots of songs together in that time, and then we worked with our singer and our bassist to sort of hone them. And that was maybe a 6-month period where we were really trying to make something that we were proud of. And we
Okay.
booked time in a studio, and we recorded an EP, and we went on a little tour of Scotland for some reason. I think that was the only place where we could find enough consecutive venues to have us over the course of like 6 days. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so it's tenuous, but it was pretty fun, but hard work. Whilst doing that, I was trying to figure out how to make any money at all. So I signed on for the dole. So I was in a town called Chepstow. That was my hometown, and there's
Okay.
not there might be a handful more, but not a huge amount of work exists in Chepstow. There's a tiny little high street with I don't know, like 10 shops in it. There's a handful of pubs, probably more pubs than shops actually. Um,
Okay.
but I
Sounds like a lot of high streets at the moment.
yeah, it's. I mean, yeah, we're lucky to have pubs right now because I think they're struggling as well. But
Yeah, they are.
um, yeah, so there weren't a huge amount of choices for work. So I signed on for job seekers allowance, and I go to my weekly meetings and say I'm talking to university teachers about design opportunities, and I'm talking to I was contacting different design agencies and asking if they need any freelance work, but had no portfolio. Like had the stuff I'd done in uni, but it was um, like the stuff you do in uni is so weird when you're looking at it through the lens of outside of uni. Like it's so rare that it's actually a career appropriate thing to land you the work that you want to do, and you don't really know that when you're creating it. But like, there's such a big difference between that. So yeah, I didn't get any freelance design work, so I started signing up for, I guess, a bit like Fiverr, but going back many years, there were other sites like Elance. I don't know if that still exists.
I think Elance and Upwork merged
Yeah.
into one site in the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I signed up for a couple of months on that. Managed to get because I used to paint as well. I used to do these big canvas paintings.
Okay.
So that was my portfolio for illustration work on there. I uploaded, I think, like 10 different paintings that I had done. I managed to get one or two little illustration gigs, but they were so poorly paid that they only just covered the cost of the subscription. And the people,
Wow.
yeah, it was terrible. The people that were commissioning me, they were like, "Oh yeah, we'll take a chance on you. We'll give you a shot on this. I think you understand what we're looking for." And they were looking for these really crappy, basically clip art stickmen doodles. Yeah, which like it's fine.
Okay.
There's a place for that. But where I was in my career, like in my mum's house, trying to play drums and earning, I think I made like £25 for this for this day's work of ink illustrations. Yeah, and like honestly, that kind of set a foundation for me for what I thought illustration work or my illustration work was worth. Um,
Okay.
and
Yeah, because if that's what you've been paid for it, that is therefore what you think it is worth.
yeah. And thinking of your own worth as an hourly value, I also think is quite detrimental because if you spent 30 years perfecting something and you can do like brain surgery in 30 minutes, should you be paid more or less than someone that has only just started and it's going to take them 4 hours? Like you can be absolutely amazing at something and it takes you no time. But yeah, again, I'm sort of digressing somewhat.
So good. This whole podcast is about journeys and connections. So
Yeah,
I
well,
feel like having a bit of a digressive segments. It's fine.
yeah, well, my wife has she got diagnosed with ADHD recently, and the more she's been
Okay.
learning about it, the more I think, oh yeah, that sounds really familiar. Then I notice it in my best friends, in everyone that I've ever been close to over the years. It's like, oh shit, yeah. Because I think my brain is very scatty when it comes to this, and like when I do conventions, I end up talking to people and we go off topic and I'm talking to someone at my table for like 10-15 minutes about something completely unrelated to the reason I'm there. And I'm there to try and sell books and make a living, but chatting to people about like dogs and I don't know, swimming in lakes or something. But
I went to an event before. It was like a networking event for a charity, and I kind of like I didn't really want to be there. I wasn't really in the mood for it, but the charity was one of my clients, so I thought yeah, I'll go along. And I went down, and the buffet there was amazing, like really really good. And I was chatting everyone I spoke to, bearing in mind I was supposed to be there to try and get some work, like
yeah,
web
yeah.
development work. Every single person I spoke to, my opening line was, "Have you tried the quiche? It's amazing."
Oh, that's beautiful. That's what you need, man. Always talk about the quiche.
And then there was a guy there who came up to me afterwards and was like, "Are you trying to like what? What? What are you doing?" I was like, "What are you on about? Like the quiche? The quiche is amazing." He went, "Aren't you supposed to be here trying to get work?" "Yeah, I am. People are going to leave here thinking of you as the quiche guy." I'm all right with
Yeah,
that. I
I
honestly,
remember that.
I am okay
Yeah.
with being the quiche man. That's
I
fine.
mean, networking is such a weird thing, isn't it?
It is. It's hard work, and yeah, I feel. But on the flip side of that, I feel like it's the kind of the people who don't approach you and thrust their business card in your face and go, "What do you want? Buy my stuff,"
Yeah.
or the firm handshake. It's the people that I always remember, the people who are slightly odd
Yeah.
and are slightly out there, and are the ones who would maybe, because if someone wanted to talk to me about quiche for an hour, I
Yeah.
would be in my element. I
Yeah.
would love that.
I mean, that's it. You want the real connections because, like, you can't work with someone
Exactly.
that's going to be pushy and stonewall you when I don't know if you ask something that they
Exactly.
don't want to hear. Like, you want someone that you can actually have a back and forth with and chat to, and yeah.
Yeah, sorry, where did we get to? Oh, we were talking
Uh,
about
After uni, being in the band.
after the drums. You were playing the drums.
Yeah.
You were in
Yeah.
Jethro.
Yeah. So
You signed up to
yeah,
Elance.
that's right. So that was bad. And then being in the band, like we played loads of gigs within a certain vicinity of South Wales. For some reason, found it impossible to get a gig in Bristol, even though it was so close. But I think there was a bit of a mental block for venues in Bristol with anyone from Wales because I think they probably had experience of people claiming that they could get a crowd into a small show in Bristol and not have anyone turn up. I think that was the
Yeah.
impression we got anyway. So
Mm.
yeah, just through gigs in Barfly and Buffalo and places like that in Cardiff, we met a lot of bands, and I ended up doing a lot of MySpace page designs. So I started with my band and a band that we played a gig with, and then another band that we played a gig with, and a friend's band, and then that led to doing album artwork for bands and T-shirt artwork.
Just like the MySpace page design, that was like the very first. It's kind of what got a lot of people into web design,
I
wasn't
think
it?
so.
Because you were
Yeah.
learning. It was all done through CSS. MySpace allowed you to put your own CSS onto the page.
That's right.
For anyone who doesn't know, CSS is a programming language that will allow you to style up elements of a web page.
Make
And
it
yeah,
pretty.
MySpace was a social network that existed about 20 years ago.
That's right. I think it still exists, but I think it's a wasteland. I don't think it even remotely resembles what it used to be.
Really?
Yeah. I think it was bought by some pop star about 10 years ago, or something like that. And so MySpace still exists. Let's see who owns MySpace.
Oh yeah, it's more of a music playing thing now. And well, I've gone on there and none of the images work.
No, that's a good sign, isn't it? Yeah, that was MySpace was my income for quite a long time. Like that was I used to charge like when I started it was 40 quid a MySpace page, and I could do one in about half a day, design and code. As I got more, I charged a bit more, so I could do them for about 80 quid a page. And then I think I reached about £100 a page at one point, and I'd get to do about 2 or 3 a day. So I was doing a lot of these pages, and just doing the pages was your own advertisement, because I'd have a link to my own MySpace page on every page that I did.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so it was amazing. And I remember the day that they announced they were turning that all off, or the custom CSS and layout stuff. It was devastating for me.
Yeah,
even though
of
by that
course.
point I'd actually started doing websites for people, so I didn't really feel it in such a way, because I was charging more for websites because they were a bigger project. Yeah, but that was a fun experience.
There's sort of like, especially when they announce that they're closing down, it's almost like a legacy thing there,
Yeah.
because you're almost like your portfolio of work
Yeah, it just
existed
goes.
on MySpace,
Yeah.
and then just like, oh yeah, no, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I still have the flat designs. I've kept images of everything that I did back then. Being a nerd, I think you often tend to keep backups. I probably have the original Photoshop documents as well.
It's probably still on a hard drive that's in an attic somewhere.
Yeah, well, it's in a box behind me. I've got years and years of
Oh,
yeah. Because once you've lost stuff, once you've lost work, I think you get a bit scared of it ever happening again. So I have Dropbox now, but I do annual backups onto an external hard drive, and I've done that for years. Like once a year at least, someone will get in touch and ask me for a file that I haven't touched for probably 4 or 5 years. Like I had to do some layout work for a composer recently, because he has run out. Like he's reprinting 2 of his albums that I did the artwork for, and really nice chap, but I did the artwork maybe 7 or 8 years ago, something like that.
okay.
Yeah, so luckily I think I had to rebuild one part of it.
So yeah, we've got. Sorry, we're jumping around a bit. So we did the MySpace pages. You were earning money for doing the MySpace pages, but you were meeting people through the drumming as well. You were making lots of connections through drumming.
Yeah, that's right. We thought it was going quite well at the time, but I think the little tour of Scotland killed the band, really, because it was hard work. My brother, being a little bit older than us, I think he was just coming to a point in his life where he's like, I kind of don't want to spend every penny I have on driving to Scotland and playing music to a room of bar staff. Yeah, it was a really like being in a band is hard work and very, very thankless unless you're, I don't know, you find your reason to love something, right? That's the thing that keeps you going. And like being in a band means that there's other things that are taking away from it. So there's other relationships where you're relying on your friends, like the other people in the band, or you're relying on your friends to actually come to the gigs. And like if you've been playing gigs for a number of years, then it gets harder to convince people to come out. And you can be really proud of your music, you can work really, really hard at it, but there's a lot that's stacked up against you. And again, now, or this time later, we'd probably do it completely differently. If I was in that position now, I think we'd release music on Spotify and on stream platforms and whatnot, and just hardly ever gig. We'd probably practice a lot less, but be like, right, should we book a month to work on an album? Or like, I think that's how we'd approach it now, because it's just the landscape changes. You can't always adapt as it's happening. You almost have to take a step back to see what you could have done differently. But yeah, so I was meeting people in bands. We played a gig with the Killers. Like, there are a few bands back then that they were kind of well known at the time, but I don't think anyone really remembers them. Like, we played with the Subways.
I remember the
Yeah,
Subways.
yeah, yeah. So we had some cool gigs in Cardiff, and that was really fun. Those ones never led to any work, but it was the smaller ones and the sort of the normal people um, bands that did lead to other bits of work, and like the MySpace pages led to more corporate work, because most of those people either had normal jobs as well, or they have gone on to have normal jobs, and a lot of them remembered me for years to come. They remembered me and would bring me bits of design and development work, and that kind of segued my career into coding. So I was coding and designing websites, sometimes very corporate, sometimes not. Did some stuff for a few different record labels. I got put in touch with a celebrity management company in London that they're called Iviva. Yeah, they don't exist now. It's now James Grant Management. So I mean,
Right.
so the people I worked with there were lovely, like really, really lovely. Not a bad word to say about them. And I was doing some stuff for slightly lesser big celebrities. That's not a very good sentence, is it? At the time, it was
Smaller,
smaller, minor, but they're still famous. It was like Philip Schofield, Vernon Kay, Holly Willoughby. Um,
I'd say they were pretty well-known names. Well, especially
yeah,
Philip Schofield and Holly
but they're
Willoughby in more
UK
recent
famous,
times.
aren't they? It's not like
Yeah,
Leonardo
yeah, yeah.
DiCaprio and whatnot. But I was doing Anton Deck. Yeah, I did some little web adverts for them and Twitter page designs where you're doing the header graphic and the icon and stuff like that.
That's big stuff. I would be I'd be shouting about that if I did stuff for Ant and Deck.
Yeah,
For sure. But with the talent management stuff, how did that come about? Did you said that someone put you in touch with the management agency, but was it a case of you were out at a gig, you got chatting to someone, and he said, "Oh, I do some work with this talent management agency. They need someone to do some design work," or was it more of a like you were just putting feelers out there, putting emails out there to different people, and it sort of cropped up through that sort of connection? What was the sort of the steps to get put in touch with that agency?
the further I get away from the situation, the more I realize that these things happen behind the scenes. So it's like what's the term, like secret whispers or something, where you don't really know where the connections come from, but
Oh,
you can
okay.
possibly trace it back really hard. So I think there's a chap at the management agency who I think knew a chap that worked with a record label that I did some work with. So I used to do a lot of work with a record label called Small Town Records. They were my first consistent client when I was, back in the band days, post uni. I was doing uh, adverts for them for Kerrang and Rock Sound and stuff. And it would be like I'd be their odd job design person. And it's a chap called Pete. It's his record label, and he worked with a chap called Ben. And Pete is based, I think, up in Leeds, and Ben is based in London. I think Ben is the one that had the other connections. So I think the connection to Iviva, to James Grant Management, I think came from Ben. Yes, that was a really, really tenuous link. That was. Um, and I did some work with a chap that used to. God, which record label was he at? He used to do stuff for David Bowie. He was like involved in like art directing in a David Bowie album launch campaign. But through him, I was doing stuff for Jilly Cooper and some other ITV things as well. And I designed some golf balls for Vernon Kay once for a charity thing that he was doing. That was a weird little thing. I've got 3 of them up in my bedroom for some reason. Just got his name on it.
You would you would keep hold of them,
Yeah,
wouldn't you? If you'd done golf balls for Vernon Kay.
yeah, super weird. Yeah, so stuff like that. I mean, I got paid really badly for all that stuff. Like for the celebrity management stuff, I got paid awfully. But it's because like like again, it's not their fault. It was my fault for not thinking I was worth anything. So I was charging, I think, £20 to £25 an hour, which I thought was great then. Like I thought that was great, but I'd only get like a few hours work each month from them. So I maybe invoice them for £100 a pop and I'm doing work with Davina McCall and stuff, and like like it's not her fault. It's not the management company's fault. They're paying me what I have asked them to, but um, yeah, all
I
part of
think
the learning
there's a lot
process, I guess.
of you see a lot of it in the freelance world where people are sort of saying things like, "How do I double my day rate? How do I increase my day rate?" And a lot of people that respond are just
Yeah,
sort of say, "Just increase it." Just but if you're doing work with someone
yeah,
and you think actually this is probably worth a bit more than that, have a chat with them and just say, can I increase my rate by a percentage? And as long as you explain the reasoning behind it
yeah,
and the rationale, where you sort of say, I've been doing this work for quite a while now. I feel like it's probably worth a little bit more than we agreed upon, and delve into the reasons, give a proper rationale, and don't just go, hi, yeah, that £40 you paid me for this yesterday. Well, today it's going to be 100.
I did have to do that once. I remember having a really horrible conversation with someone. So again, another record label person running a really small record label, and he asked me to design and build a Big Cartel page for him. And I was like, yeah, I can do that, no problem. I hadn't built one before, but I'd done so many MySpace and like website things at that point. I was like, yeah, I can do it. And I think I quoted
Okay.
50 quid, something like that. And then I logged in and saw all of the different options for where you can put custom code and the different tags that you need to carefully use. And I went back to him after a day and I was like, it needs to be like 150 quid. Like, and again, it's still not very much money, honestly, for a
Not
design
at
and
all.
development. Yeah, but that's me. That's how my career has sort of gone on, and it ground me down over the years. But this guy got really defensive with me, and he got really angry that I had asked him if I could charge more, and he was like, why the hell are you telling me that it's going to be like 3 times as much? Like, how can you justify that? And I had to just calmly say, like, I've looked
Yeah.
at the back end of Big Cartel now, and I have a better understanding of what it's going to take to do the job. Um, so that is what it is. And he was fine, but that conversation is difficult, and I think that then puts a wall up because then you feel defensive, and you also that chips away at your own value as well. Because if you're not even charging very much in the first place, and then
Yeah.
you get asked to justify it, then it really does
Oh yeah, for sure.
knock
If
your
you
confidence.
if you feel like you need to put the price up because you're being underpaid for it, and then someone asks you to spend more of your time justifying why you need to be paid more for the time, and then you just think, well, is it
Yeah,
even worth it? Is it really that worth the hassle? If I've got to justify myself to someone who
yeah,
obviously
that's
doesn't
it.
value me and doesn't really understand what I'm doing for them.
And there for me, there's always been that split in my brain where there's a bit of me that doesn't value myself as well. So I'm like, yeah, of course you're right for questioning this. And then there's the other bit of me that's like, I guess, defensive and thinking, no, I
Why
am
do you
worth
think that
more.
is? Why do you think you question your self worth in any way? Is there anything that you think has happened, or do you feel like it roots quite firmly back to the e-lancing gigs that you're doing to get started?
It's a can of worms, this one, because I think it's all the way back through childhood and through life. Honestly, I think through my parents, I got lovely parents, love them, but like I say, my mum being a piano teacher, that's the sort of the warmth and like, yeah, you can paint. Like my mum bought me canvases and paints when I was a teenager, and she bought me sketchbooks, and like we go to the art shop and she'd be like, oh, you want a pen or a paintbrush, here you go. Or we go to the library or we go to the bookshop and she'd buy me books. Like I'd say, mum, this one looks interesting, and she'd just get it for me. And my dad, being just, I guess, the opposite end of the spectrum. And my dad's lovely as well, but his sort of history has been much more business focused. And mum would always talk about the sort of difference in their role being like he's the financial provider and she's the carer. That was the sort of the way that I think she compartmentalized it. But I think that had a definite impact on my brain and my ability or inability to unpack these things. Because I think on the one hand, you're being told, yeah, you can do anything. And then on the other hand, you're also clearly shown that, no, you can't do anything. You have to, follow this pathway. You have to do things in a certain way. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think brains are complicated, aren't they?
Kind of going on from there, then you've done the freelance thing. You're making a living, doing design, doing development, building websites, building web pages, doing design work. How do you then think, I'm going to make a graphic novel? Was it something that you'd been doing alongside all of the sort of the the bands and the corporate design and development work, or was there a moment when you thought, I just want to do this? I want to do this now.
Uh,
Branch off.
yeah, it's a good question. I guess it's a bit of everything, right? So I mentioned already that I didn't really discover comics in a non-Marvel 2000 AD way until quite late. So I lived in a shared house in Cardiff, and one of my housemates was he's my best pal, and he's an animator named Luke Hyde. He's a wonderful, wonderful human. Love him to bits, and he got made redundant when we were living together. So the animation company that he worked at went under, and it's roughly around the same time that I think MySpace was changing its rules. So it was like pre-sale of the platform, but it was when they were like locking down the CSS customization stuff. And working with bands can be really, really hard sometimes. Like sometimes it's amazing, like bands can be the nicest clients, they can be the most creative and understanding. But then sometimes you get bands where they've got like individually the members might have stronger opinions than any other band that you work with. So you send one thing that one person loves and the others hate. That was becoming quite a mental challenge. It's like doing things for low budget when you're having that kind of pushback.
Yeah.
So creatively, I wanted to do something on my own, and I would always draw anyway. And for a while, the stuff for the bands, the t-shirts and the album covers and things, that was scratching that itch. But it kind of stopped being mine because I'd be asked to do things in other people's style. So I wanted to do something that was just mine. And when Luke got made redundant, we were living in the same house. He is an absolutely amazing illustrator. So I was like, why don't you draw something that I've written? Like, why don't we work together on a comic book? That started, like, I wrote a story, I shared it with him, he started to draw it, he did an amazing job, but then he got a job as well after maybe a month or two. He got a new job, and that meant that him working on that book stopped for nearly a year. And I still wanted to do it. I was like, well, I've started this now. Like I've opened Pandora's box. I want to do this. So I made a short comic called The Fox, and I took it to Thought Bubble, which is a convention up. It was up in Leeds then, and I just took it up with my friend that introduced me to comics, a chap named Dan. Um, such a weird set of like circumstances, but he was in between houses where the tenancy on one place ran out, and he had a week where he was essentially homeless before the next one started. So he came and stayed on our sofa for a week, but he had to bring all the stuff from his house with him because he didn't have anywhere else to put it. So he brought all of his comics, and he was showing me all of these really cool comics, like Blankets. I think Blankets was like one that he really pushed on me, which is just an amazing autobiographic graphic novel about growing up and love. And it's wonderful. But that really changed things for me. It's reading that, working with this comic with Luke, and then it all stopping, and I'm like, I have to do this. And I went to Thought Bubble with Dan, and I took a copy of The Fox and I showed it to a couple of people because I'd go up to their tables and I'd be buying comics and talking to them. And there was a chap called Duncan Fagredo who draws the Hellboy comics. Yeah, really lovely guy. I was at the back of his queue, and his wife came up to me and said, "Can you just anyone who joins the queue after you, can you tell them that Duncan's taking a lunch break after you, so there's no point queuing up." So I had to I had to like fend away like I don't know 5 people just to be like, yeah, he's not taking any more after me. And then, but as a result, he had such a lovely chat with me, and he was asking me who I am and what I do, and I was like, well, I'm an artist, but like I guess I make websites. But he was like, oh, do you have any of your work with you? I was like, well, yeah. And thinking like this acclaimed, successful, kind comic book artist wants to see my work. I'm just a guy on the other side of his table, and he's asking about me. It changed everything, because then I went home and started working on it properly. So the first comic I did, I think, was 8 pages long. And then I went home and I turned it into a 34-page comic. And then I shared that with a few people. And I think someone passively said, oh, it'd be really cool if you did a series of these. And I thought, oh, yeah, it would. Yeah. So then I did 3 of them where it's 3 stories. It's one story overlapping through 3 comics. yeah, that was my first set of comics. Then I took that to conventions where I have the table, like I'm sitting behind the table and selling comics. And again, the first couple of years I went with my friend Luke, who he did finish that comic book. We did finish the one that I wrote and he illustrated, and still very proud of that. But that was the real start point of everything, was those two things, was the Fox, the Wolf and the Woodsman is my, that was what my series became, and the book that me and Luke did, which is called Losing Sleep. And I think I learned a lot through the process of all that. I don't think they're necessarily perfect by any means, but I'm still proud of what they did for me, because it's almost like ripping a band-aid off with that sort of stuff. And as soon as I was behind the table at these conventions and talking to people, that's when everything really started to change, because I was still doing the design work and the development work, and that was my focus because it was how I'd pay bills. You know, I knew how to quote for a website, even if I wasn't charging enough. It was enough to cover my bills and the shared houses and whatnot. But then one year at the conventions, Luke wasn't able to make it, so we'd booked to share a table together, and then the week before he wasn't able to make it, and again that was like the biggest push for me. Like that was like all of a sudden I'm up in this place where I don't know anyone, but I was seeing people that I met the year before, and it was absolutely mind blowing. Like the
Mm.
experience was so different because I was able to have more concentrated, purposeful conversations with the people on the other side of the table about my work, about their work, about comics, and
Yeah, it just sounds like, yeah, kind of knowing how to get into that sort of thing, and it's never going to be a straightforward path to get into that sort of work. You know, the world there, you've got to be
yeah,
kind of thrust into it because it's, I guess, it's quite unknown and uncertain. So you do need something or someone to really give you that push in the right
yeah.
direction. I guess, that's kind of how you get into comics. So your up and coming novel, you've got, is it Haru?
That's right. Yeah.
Haru, yes. So Haru is coming up. And when I was speaking to you earlier, you said about an editor found you on Etsy. So was it a case of some of the stuff that you've already talked about? That was up on your Etsy page, and then an editor
Yeah.
found it and sort of said, "Can you make us something for us?" Or was Haru an idea you already had that you pitched to them?
It was something that I pitched, and I mean, I tried to keep the story concise because I know I've been talking your ear off for a while. But the way that it came to be is quite another unusual set of circumstances. After the initial conventions and stuff with Luke were going on, I came up with another idea for a story, and I took it to. I actually had an agent back then for the Fox and the Wolf and the Woodsman book, and things didn't go well with that agent, which is
Okay.
another like really important life lesson for me, I think, because like once you achieve something, you think that's it, but the reality is that it's not. Like you need to have your own reason to keep doing these things. Like the goal isn't ever like the result that you think it's going to be. You know, you need
Mhm.
to have the drive in there for your own purposes. But anyway, after the conventions, like I used to get so overwhelmed by the good feelings at the conventions that afterwards I'd have a crash, like a real big emotional crash for about a week or so.
I can imagine, yeah.
And it would be in that sort of pit where I'd force myself to do something surprising. Like I'd either work on a new idea or start approaching potential people to work with. And I approached a bunch of agents, and I got offered representation by two different agents. I picked one, and it didn't go to plan. And it took maybe a year or so out of my career where I was like working with, like I thought I was working with her, but it was always a closed door on the other side. So she would
Right,
always
okay.
say like, no, it's not ready yet. No, there was nothing. Like I'd never get any feedback. It was just no. And I took her Haru, and she said that she'd like to take it out as a children's picture book. So I went away. I worked to develop it into a children's picture book. I took it back, and she put me in touch with a publisher, and they said they'd like to see it as a graphic novel. And I was like, it was meant to be a graphic novel. Here's what it was meant to be.
Yeah.
And they said, great, we want it. Let me just get it signed off. And then 6 months later, they rejected it
Oh,
um, with no feedback. They just said, we won't be picking this up at this time. And then my agent her doors were increasingly closed by this point. And again, like, nothing against my agent at that time. Like, she's really, really nice, really kind. She just wasn't able to give me the support that I needed to be able to do the things that I wanted. So I thought, well, stuff this, right?
Okay.
Flip the table, right? I make
Yeah.
the comic that, like, ignore that publisher that said they wanted it and didn't. Ignore the agent. I'm just gonna, like, this is my comic, and I spent a couple of months making the first chapter. Took that to a convention, and it was even more incredible than anything else I had done previously. Like, just the interest was just so much nicer, and like, I'd come back feeling like a celebrity, having been there selling my work to these people. Then I took that to my agent, and she didn't have much interest in it, really. So I thought, well, stuff it, I'll do the second chapter. And I did a Kickstarter, and that was really successful. Had something like 380 backers.
Amazing.
Yeah, went really well, and that was the second chapter. Took that out to the conventions, and then I think it was a little bit after that I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna part ways with my agent at the time.
Yeah.
There are a few cosmic things that happened around the same time. So my mum passed away. The pandemic happened, and my son was born. In the space of 6 months, all this stuff happened, and
That's a lot to kind of process all at
yeah,
once.
and I was still making websites, and like, by this point in my website career, I had teamed up with a another designer. So we were running this partnership, and his design work's excellent, but it meant that I got to do no design work. I was pretty much just code, and
Yeah.
like, my code was learnt from looking at MySpace source code. Like, I'm not a particularly good developer. I think I'm relatively intelligent in that I can figure these things out, but I don't know how these things are done properly. Yeah, so my son was born and couldn't see any family, and I sort of hole up in the spare room on this crappy little laptop, and I try and code until like 3 a.m, trying to hit this deadline, and it just made me unbelievably sad. So I thought, right, that's it. Taking a bit of time off from this, I had a chat with my business partner and helped him find a few other developers to team up with. And I parted ways with my agent, and I reached out to a couple of other agents that I had talked to previously to see if they'd be interested in working with me. And one of them put me in touch with someone else that she knows who was just starting out agenting, who is my current agent, and she is amazing. She's absolutely amazing. I told her what I was hoping for was like constructive feedback on pitches. I showed her some stuff that I've been working on. And before I had even signed with her, she gave me far more time than my previous agent had.
Right.
So there
Okay.
was like instantly that like a connection of like, we're looking for the same kind of thing. Even if what I was offering wasn't there at that point, we were still sort of pushing in the same direction. So we worked on a pitch together over the course of 6 to 9 months, and it was the self-published stuff that I'd already done, but it was just all the extra stuff in the document. So it's like the rest of the story and how that would play out. And we took that out to publishers, and we got some interest and got offered a couple of deals. I think we got offered two really firm deals and one tentative one, and we verbally accepted one. But then things happened in that publisher that meant that it all just went up in the air. Like, all of our contacts there suddenly lost their jobs overnight. I think it was like a restructuring thing, but it suddenly meant I was back to square one, thinking like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Like, this is unbelievable. This was like meant to be the turning point in my career, and I've done everything to get to this point. And self-publishing stuff costs money, so like, I
Yeah.
don't
Of
want to
course.
be printing, storing these things constantly, and each run you do when you're self-publishing, there's a chance that each run is slightly different, on slightly different paper or slightly different quality. So it's just not easy to always be on top of that side of things. So it's like, it's the next step is like being published, and
Yeah.
then I thought I was there, and it just went to pot overnight. Days later, I think it was about 3 days later, my agent messaged me and said, "Oh, I've had this interesting email from an editor at this other publisher saying that they've seen your work on Etsy. I told them that we verbally accepted another offer, but like, can we see what happens?" It's funny because I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about that kind of thing.
Okay.
Because it's tricky, because it's like there's so many relationships involved, and the person that found me on Etsy doesn't even work at the publisher anymore. She went on to a different job. But like, that's what I mean. There's so much serendipity in the world when it comes to create. I mean, I guess all work, but like specifically creative work. People move around jobs, and
Mhm.
it's quite random with what things are going to be a success and what things aren't. Yeah, so we had to start talking to this other publisher, and it went really well. The offer that they put on the table was um, much better in
Okay.
general. Like, it was like, in terms of the rights that I keep, it was because they're a publisher. That's like specifically what they do, rather than trying to do like multimedia rights and things. So it was just a publisher, and they're great. They're called Andrews McMeel, and if you are unaware, they are the publisher of Calvin and Hobbes and Gary Larson's Far Side comics.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Okay.
and they are an independent publisher, but they've been around, I think, since the 70s. So
Wow. Okay.
they've got a really firm history. And every interaction I've had with people that work there has been wonderful. My editor's amazing. Um, and it's just been an absolute delight. So that's been me for the past year. Has been working on Haru, and I'm working on the second book right now. So I'm halfway through inking it. I finished the first book, and the first book is out in April in the UK, and that's paperback. It's out in March in the US hardback, and then April paperback. I think that's how they're running it.
Is there a link to pre-order it at the moment or anything like that? I can put in the episode description.
Yeah. It should be on any bookshop. So
Hmm.
bookshop.org, I think, that's the ethical one. It is up on Amazon, and it's being distributed by Simon and Schuster.
Okay.
So there is a listing for it on Simon and Schuster, which has links to other shops as well. And I think I'm going to be doing a book launch in Bristol, actually, in April, on April 11th, in my local bookstore, which is called the Small City Bookshop. I'm going to be doing a little launch event. I don't know how popular launch events are, but I feel like it would be such a shame to not actually celebrate the launch of my first properly released book. Like,
Yeah, for sure.
I want to be proud of it, and I want to be able to share that with some friends. So,
Yeah,
um,
amazing. Oh, it sounds like it's been such a journey and such a story that's led you up to this point that, of course, you're going to want to celebrate it. And
yeah.
what better to do that with a book launch? One final question, and that is, if you could go back and do everything all over again, start back from 17, 18, whatever, leaving school, is there anything you'd change about the journey you've been on, or would you like to end up anywhere else? I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want to end up anywhere else because it seems like you've done everything possible to get to this point right now. But is there anything you would have done differently
uh,
throughout the course of your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this on and off over the years, honestly. Like, there were points when I thought, why did I study graphic design? I wish I'd been making comics at that point. Even if I'd studied animation, maybe I would have done it sooner. Um, but I think there is value to having a zigzaggy journey, like the different things that you learn along the way that you probably wouldn't have learned any other way. And having done so much graphic design and development, I mean, maybe not so much the development. I think the development is like it's a cheeky little skill that you can use to almost cheat your own life. Like, I can
Yeah.
make my own website. That's free. That could cost hundreds. Um, but the design work and all of that practice, I think, is really useful with how I put things together now. So when I'm laying my front covers out, when I'm laying out pages, just having that innate sense of space, and because I feel it when I'm looking at other people's comics at conventions, and like, I don't want to be judgmental of other people's work in a negative way, but like, there's a inherent sense of like, if something's too close to the edge, or if the font looks wrong, or if it's too close to the edge of a speech bubble, those things, they give me like an internal like wince, where
Okay. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
that's the thing that I hope to avoid with my work, that I think you can only get through years of practice of the weird skills.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
if I'd really do anything different. Maybe, like, I think validating writing at a younger age would have been really useful, because I nearly, like, halfway through the graphic design course, I nearly quit and applied to do a English creative writing course instead. But thought, I've come this far, I might as well finish it.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I think as soon as I had graduated, starting writing then would have been a really beneficial thing. And beyond that, I'm not really sure. Maybe taking less crap from tricky customers. And I don't
Yeah,
mean being rude. Like being rude never benefits anyone. Just like knowing that um, if my skills and my work has value, knowing how to put that forward. Because there's no point being abrasive. Like if someone doesn't value you, they're never gonna value you. But you need to find the ones that do.
yeah, yeah. You've got to find the people who will value you, and if you get, I guess it's recognizing those red flags almost,
Yeah,
the indicators that things aren't going to go well, and it's not going to be a good project, and it's going to be hard work. I think, yeah,
yeah,
that sort of thing that only comes with time as well. It's taken me years to kind of recognize
yeah.
those
And
sorts of
even then,
signals.
there's always curveballs.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
things
yeah.
that you can't prepare for. Um,
For sure. Yeah, I've worked on some projects where everything's been going fine. You get the first payment in, and then all of a sudden you're 3 months down, you're waiting on 3 months worth of payments, and then it
yeah,
turns out she was a con artist
yeah,
and has
yeah.
now been to prison over the whole thing.
Oh
Long
man.
story. Uh, but yeah, that was devastating. But anyway, this is not not about me. Joe, thank you so much for sharing your story
Our pleasure.
and taking us through the steps that you've gone to. I will drop all of the links into the episode description for things like buying the book, your Etsy page, also your band as well, probably if any of that's up on Spotify.
It is, yeah, yeah. You could listen to that, yeah.
I'll
Yeah,
stick all that on
we
there as well.
recorded 1,000 Suns, so we only have one EP, but that's on Spotify.
It's going in the episode description.
Yeah.
Brill.
Awesome.
Thanks, Joe. I'll catch up with you soon, mate.
Beautiful. Thank you, Alex.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye, bye, bye.
Thanks so much for listening to episode 3. If you've listened all the way through the episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a review, maybe even sharing with some of your friends. Similarly, if you've got a story you would like to tell, feel free to get in touch. The email address is in the episode description, along with the links to some of the things we've spoken about in the podcast today. I'll be back with another episode on Monday next week, so hopefully you'll be hearing again from me soon. Thanks, bye.